So after my last video showing you how to work with PyScript, I got a number of comments asking how it will work with HTML form and lists, and maybe some of you want to see more examples on what you can do with PyScript and building up more full-fledged projects with that. And this is what we'll be doing in this video. I'm gonna create a series of videos where I create cool mini projects together with you, line by line, break down the meta model behind using PyScript. We can make a series, and at the end of the series, we do a large project where we build a full-fledged dashboard using PyScript. So this video is the first, and we will go ahead and deploy a nice little PyScript app and have it hosted for free on GitHub. So I have this on, this is my URL, onlyphantom.github.io/NBLite-PyScript. I'm going to teach you how to do that exactly, so you can also launch your own nice little app on using PyScript and using GitHub Actions, right? And at the end of the video, you should have a nice repo with an actions there running, and with your actions, you'll be able to launch your own web app for free using just PyScript and GitHub Actions. Each of these tutorial, I plan to have this deployed and paste a link to the live demo site so you can try it out yourself. You should subscribe if you want to follow along the journey, and let me know in the comment section if you have interesting ideas you want me to pursue for this series. Now, as long as it demonstrates a clear use case for PyScript, then it's all game. Alright, so for this video, I asked around my Tech Bros community to send me some inspiration, and someone posted this. I think it's this one. So someone posted this on LinkedIn, this repository by Eduardo. I reached out to Eduardo asking for his permission to use this repository for this video, and he was totally cool about it. So it's pretty nifty. This is how it looks like, right? If I run, let's say I click on submit, and it will just go ahead. It says, okay, generate this from this notebook. I just have to pass a link to a notebook or pass in a sample one. I'll show you how to pass in different ones. I already have a few notebooks that I tried later. You see that in the video later. Let me zoom out a little couple of levels. And then from here, I could either click on this green button or I could hit Shift Enter. Let me use Shift Enter for now. And we're just going to run that. And then it's going to generate that plot. Pretty cool, eh? It gives you the matplotlib, NumPy generates that, and then it generates the plot for you. And then you can accompany that with your own tags and stuff. So allowing anyone to add Python notebooks and then have this running there. You don't even need Google Colab anymore. Not really, but you get the idea, right? It's a pretty cool idea. So within 10 to 15 minutes, you will be able to launch your own project with this and create your own app and then put it out for the world to see. Just for completion's sake, I'm going to show you what I've done, but all of this will be on my GitHub. If you want to skip ahead right into the main body of the tutorial without necessarily having to download the zip file or do any kind of like signups and stuff, then you can just go ahead and fork the GitHub and just get along. But I'm going to, just for completeness sake, I'm going to just walk you through the process. So once you're in the create new repo, so if you don't know how to get to this page, create a new repository that's there on the link. And then you just have to give it a name. I'm going to call it NBLite, and I'm going to say PyScript. So it's more descriptive what it's doing. And I'm going to say a demo of Eduardo's NBLite PyScript app, right? And here I'm going to leave everything public and stuff so you can fork it. I'm not going to have a git ignore. I'm actually going to enable these Azure pipelines because then I can maybe deploy that. And I don't know, I'm just going to leave it there. All right, so create repository. Okay, now we have that. So at this time of recording, there is no GitHub repo yet, but Eduardo is going to do that. So when he does that, then the better way to do it is to just fork from his repository instead of actually going in there and trying to download that. But for now, because I'm going to wait for that, and if if the GitHub repo is live, I'm going to leave a link in the description. You can go in there and just do the fork workflow instead. All right, so you can also keep track with the upstream, and if there are any changes, you can just fork from it. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and show you, you can download it real quick. Just go into the URL. So this is the URL. And click on download. Or you can just clone it. If you have a GitLab account, GitLab is awesome. You should definitely have an account. If you don't have one, then you can click on the download and just download the zip file. Right? So I'm going to assume that you've done one of these two. And if you have downloaded that, depending on where you're at, let's say I'm in desktop. So I'm going to change directory to my desktop. All right? And let's say I have that downloaded on my on the desktop, then I could just go ahead and unzip that. You say -d. If you say -h, help function, and in the help menu, I find that the -d actually says extract files into external directory. So that's exactly what I want. So just gonna go up here, and now I'm gonna say -d dot, and I'm gonna say NBLite. That's the file that we downloaded, right? So dot means the current directory. I'm saying unzip off this, unload that into the current directory, and put a -d flag for that. So let me hit enter, and now it's done. So now it's on the NBLite -main. So if I print my directory now and I set list, then I will see NBL main, and this is where it's extracted to, right? So all we need to do is to just move into that directory, clear the screen, and then we can just open that up in a code editor. So I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. You can use whatever you want, and just press code dot and enter, and it would open up Visual Studio Code. So once you have that open up in your Visual Studio Code or in your favorite IDE, I'm going to make a few changes before we push this onto our GitHub repo. So I know that we already created a GitHub repo. We haven't pushed anything to it yet. So we're going to, instead of a div, I'm actually going to change this to a P. So we're just going to need that to be a paragraph. We don't need them to be a div. And I'm going to move this all the way down to the bottom. So I'll move that down the form. And that looks about right to me. Maybe even bottom. Yeah, there. And then I want to just be clear that this is the original order. So I'm going to say original order. And then I'm going to link it to Eduardo's Bonnet's. I'm sorry if I pronounce this, your name incorrectly. Eduardo's repository here. So original order. And then there's a link there to his GitLab account. And I'm also going to add a title in the head, among the enclosing head tags. So I'm going to say title. And then I'm just going to say NBLite. NBLite. Code demo. We're going to save that. I want to open up README as well, because I also want to put credits where, so credit back to Eduardo's repository here. So I want to say that this is a for of, check out the original examples, add a bit of context, maybe for educational purposes. Whoops, right. I probably don't need auto to do. I think that's good enough. If this becomes a GitHub repository on Eduardo's account, I will just sort of link it there instead, and I'll probably delete this repository, and I recommend you fork it from there instead. All right, I'm gonna add a consideration here and say something like, if you use this project, please credit it back to the original order, and put his name there. So I'm gonna save all of that. Since we're not using GitLab, I mean, if you're using GitLab, you can save that, you can keep it there, but I guess there's nothing wrong with just keeping it there as well, so that's fine. Let's make sure there is a Git. Okay, so this is not a Git repository. So let's go ahead and clear the screen and just do Git init. And we have all of that stuff, so we can just gonna... I'm gonna say this is pre-recording commit, because I've not edited this yet. And then I'm gonna say git. I've already done. This is a video on the main branch anyway. So if you look at git branch, I can see that this is the only branch, and there is an asterisk that tells me that I'm currently on that branch. So it's good. Now I just need to add origin. So I'm gonna say git remote add origin, and then paste that link in here. Wanna git push -u origin main. Okay, once it's done, you can open up, refresh your browser. Now we're gonna bring this back up. Click on settings, click on pages, and this is where we set up a page. So I'm gonna say main, and this is root, this is fine. I'm gonna say save. Open link in a new. Okay, we don't have this yet, and we're gonna set that up. If you give it about 3 to 5 minutes, for me it took about 3 minutes, you should see that if you refresh the page, it's now automatically done for you, right? So you have the deployed already, you have that on your own GitHub URL. And now there's the URL to notebook. There's all of this link. Let's make sure all of this still works. I'm gonna explain the, how this is done. And I'm gonna probably try to invite Eduardo and see if it's okay for me to chat with him, maybe over a call, over a sort of a Google Meet arrangement, and we record that and put that on our channel as well, and we walk through his processes and some tips, from Eduardo himself. But for now, let me just go ahead and run that, and let's see if everything still works. And it does, right? So there is the matplotlib. So you have the matplotlib.pyplot as plt, import numpy as mp, and then you set a random seed, and it still runs. So when you hit run, you can do shift enter. If you've seen my earlier video, you know this already. But let's also try a different notebook URL, right? So I have one open up on my link here, and the link, let me just show you the GitHub repository for this. Within this, I have a repository here that talks about data analysis. This is the course materials for practical data analysis with Python and SQL. So Python and SQL. So Python for data analysis is this. This is if I click on that, there is the IPython notebook, and you can render that using GitHub. But we want to try and see if our app here works, right? So you want to click on raw, and then it gives you a URL there. You copy that and you paste it back in here. So I want to just remove all of this, and I'll just paste that in, and I want to click on submit. So let's see. And done. So it does produce the output that we were expecting. We see the code examples here, and we could continue to just do import numpy as np, import pandas as pd, and I mean even our checkboxes are formatted correctly. Let's try another one. Let's put another URL here. Dumbcoin. Okay. Matplotlib inline is not gonna work. Let's remove that. See if everything else still works. So there are a few things here that needs to be ironed out. I'm sure this is a very new project, so a lot of things are going to be ironed out. But you can see that the main functionality of taking the code and printing that out, that is working. So you see the code chunks are there, the text are there, they separate that, right? So the code very intelligently find out, okay, this is the code chunk, and it just removed, just print that up using the PyScript repo. So anything that is meaningfully represented as a Py repo, so PyREPL, and it would just use the Py repo to represent them. So these are all the code chunks in there. And then the text itself, they're just going to be rendered in text, right? Now let's go and take a look at the code example here and see what's so special about using PyScript to achieve all of this, right? So if you look at the head, let's start from the top, right? So that's the NBLite.js. This is where the magic is happening. So this is actually what Eduardo's written. So he has the get dependencies and he has the to PyScript. So what does this actually do? Now, if you take a look at this, it generates this kind of like an iframe, sort of an embedded frame. It has the HTML, it has the head, it has the link. So you want to be careful here that if you we add a title, we want to add the title here on the main root itself, okay, on the DOM root itself, and you don't want to accidentally add this into the NBLite. So this is not what you want to be doing, all right? Because these are all individual sort of frames that are embedded in the main root of the document. So this is not where you want to do that. You don't want to go accidentally adding your title in here and stuff, okay? And then there is the link, there's the style sheet, and then there's a script, okay? This is PyEnv. This is something we learned in the earlier video. We talk about how to use that to sort of create all dependencies. And in the previous video, we set up our NumPy, pandas, all of this stuff here. But here it doesn't do that. What it does is to call getDeps and then put scripts in here. So where does this getDeps come from? Now, if you look at getDeps, it comes up here. And what it's doing is to try and figure out two kind of import patterns. So you have the from something, import something. You have to import something, or you have to import something as something else. And try to figure that out because it needs to bring that into the PyEnv, so that any dependencies for your notebooks, so for example, in this project, you see all the any kind of libraries that are required at all to run the notebook, that gets figured out and that gets put into the PyEnv. If this doesn't make sense to you, you want to watch the earlier video, right? Then it closes the head and then it runs the body. Within it, it runs the scripts. And where did scripts come from? It comes from here. So scripts is here, and then this is where scripts is used. So this is the variable that is being created at the top, and then it returns this, right? It says for each cell in cells, take that. If the cell is a code cell, then use the Py repo. So this is what we saw in the in the app itself. We see that anytime that there is a code chunk, you use the Py repo to render that out. And this is something we learned as well in the earlier video. But if it's not, if it's in a markdown format, then return. Just take use the mark external library. This is also something you call. You find that in index. I think you find that in index.html. You will see that we call mark.mean.js. This is the dependency here. So we're using that dependency to sort of render our nice markdown format. So the header, the bullets, all of those things get rendered out nicely. I'm gonna close out README now. So that is what it's doing. And then you have the parse, and then you add the code fencing, and then you you add a new line. So essentially what this is doing is to just do something like this and then do something like that, and then here basically have all your markdown in here, right? So summarize it a little bit. If it's a code chunk, use PyRepo. If not, then use the markdown and use the mark library, which is the external dependency that we brought in here to render that out. Else, so if these two cases fail, then just print a code chunk. Right, and then finally join all of them together using separated by a new line. So there's a \n, and then there's a create iframe, and create iframe really just call the browser document itself, and then say create element iframe, and then it writes the content. And you will see that it exports these two. It exports the open NB as PyScript and NB to PyScript. So this NB to PyScript and open NB as PyScript. So these two are being exported, so we could use them. Just do a quick search on that window. We can see where it's being used, NBLite. We see that they are being used in index.js. So if you click into index.js, you will see that, okay, windows.onload, and then immediately it says open NB as PyScript, and then you know, it gets to call this because you export that in here, right? So this becomes NBLite.openNB or window.NBLite.nb to PyScript, and that's kind of what NBLite.js is doing. Index.js itself, it gets URL. So you realize that when we enter something, let me just bring this up a little bit more now. When we click on submit, what this does is that it just append that, and you see that there's a URL, and then it has all of this. So these are all the stuff that we entered there, and the search parameters, these are all the search parameters, the URL is a parameter and stuff. All of those things are being collected in here. So you have the object to .from entries, and it says if you find a URL, then use the URL. So this is a ternary operator. It's saying that find if it's a null. If it's not a null, if it is a null, then use the sample that is provided in the repository. So sample is here, sample.ipynb. I'm using Visual Studio Code, so it already generates this for me very nicely. If you use something else, you probably still have the same, I don't know. But once you have a null, that means you don't have a URL in the address bar, you don't have a URL in the query parameters, then just use the provided sample.ipy notebook. But if you do have one, meaning this will not be null, then use that. So it says take the parameters and find the URL component of that. Now if you click onto, if you see this, this is the whole URL. This is the URL component. This is the query parameter called URL, and it's gonna say, okay, take this instead. So that's what it's taking, and you get the result of that, you pass it back into this function. So this function called getURL, which is this gets returned, and you say take that, and then open NB as PyScript, which is from here, open NB as PyScript, take all of that, and then just generate them into JSON, and then call NB to PyScript, and then create iframe. And NB to PyScript basically call what we have here, which is what we explained earlier, which is the cells. If it's a code, do this. If it's a markdown, do this. Otherwise, do this, right? So all of this, right? This is the entry point. The entry point, the get URL, whatever it's get, take them and then call the open NB as PyScript, passing in NB content, and then you have that. Then it says take the target ID and create iframe with the target ID, generating first the response and then using the response to call NB to PyScript, which is exactly this chunk. And then what about target ID? Now target ID is passed in as a second parameter here, create iframe. So let's go down to create iframe, and you see in create iframe, the second parameter here, it used this target ID to say get element by ID and then append child. So it means that in your index.html, you do want to have something that has this target ID. You do want to find something that has NB content. Now let's take a look at this. In here, we see that there's the ID, NB content. So you cannot give it any other name. If you want to change this name, you need to change this here as well. So this gets fit all the way here, which is going to be used by the document.getElementById. So if you don't have one, you can't find it, then it will not be able to run successfully. It will not be able to render that into the div. So this is going to be rendered correctly because it identified them by the ID itself. And that's kind of it actually, and the rest is just a simple, these are all basic HTML now. There is not really a lot of magic happening here. This is really just raw HTML for the rest of it. So that's, we explained the NBLite index. Style is just kind of giving it everything, you know, a little bit of aesthetics. If you want to change things, go ahead and do that. You want to change the font family, you can give it a different color. You can definitely do that. You can change the background color. If you don't like this to be a light blue, you can change that to be, let's, I don't know, find a color. And then later when you push it, it would, let me just go ahead and just do index.html and just open with live server. And now you see that, right? So if you change this again to something like, well, there you go. You can change the color of the text to be white. We need this to have a bit more width, I think. I think 300 pixel looks about right. So let's go and copy that and let's paste that in as well. But yeah, that's what CSS does, right? It allows you to just sort of change things around a little bit. If you don't want a button to look like that, you can also change that. And let's add another one here. So just to give it a little bit more, make it a little bit bigger. And that's kind of it. I think that's what CSS is doing. I think it's pretty clear. So that's, we explained this, this is just the external dependency. And from here, it just says URL to notebook. You pass in a URL and then it submits that. And you notice that when it's submitting, it's actually just going to call itself. So index.html, this is index.html, just really calling itself. And it used a method of get, which is really just calling itself. But what gave it the magic is that when you call get, what's actually happening is that every time this page loads, window.onload get called, and this is the entry point to all of this thing happening. So for example, the get URL is going to get kicked off, and then you have the NB content, and then you have the get URL. So if you want to, you can add a console log statement here, and you will see that save that, and you go into your console, and you refresh the page, and you will see get URL kickoff, right? So get URL kickoff is here, because this is the entry point. Every time the window loads, then it will just kick this off. And every time it loads, which means all we need to do is to sort of just refresh the page, just get this again. So getting that page again has the effect of just reloading that, which gonna call this, and then this is gonna call get URL, and then this, once it gets that, it's gonna come in there and then perform this operation. This is from NBLite, which go ahead and do this, calling nb.PyScript. nb.PyScript is here, and it's gonna do the rest of the work here. And that's really all about it. Let's go ahead now. We do a push, and then we go back to GitHub and see what see the latest results, right? And now on the GitHub, you can see that 3 minutes ago, it's successfully deployed. This is the mid recording commit. So mid recording commit is basically the one that we just push up. That's our new URL, the better color and bigger button. So now if I go back to that, you should see that it gets successfully built, right? Now, not to be confused with this. This is our local host. This is our live server running on a local host. This is running locally. If we close that out now, this is the live one. Right, so all of this still works. You can still see the text, you can still see everything is still doing well, except now the button is a little bit bigger. We have a border radius, and then we have a colors, and then there is the much longer text sort of a URL field for us to enter the URL, but everything still works. And let's go back to the PyScript itself so I can explain to you what's happening here. Now, all of this also is possible because of the actions. So if you click on actions, you can see that, okay, here, just 54 seconds ago, the pages built and deployment. If you click on that, it will give you this build deployment pipeline. It tells you that this is what it's doing, build, and then deploy. Just 7 seconds ago, it successfully deployed, and this is the URL for that. And you can read about the status and stuff. All of this, I will have a video on talking about the actions in more detail on GitHub Actions and using CI and CD, but that's probably going to be a separate video because I want to keep this just very focused. I want to say that at this point, you should have enough confidence to go ahead and just deploy your own PyScript app. Just follow along this video. I also want to say thanks to Eduardo for again being so generous with with his time there replying to my email and stuff. I asked him permission before because I didn't see I don't see a license in here, so I want to make sure that he's okay with that. I asked him, hey, is it okay if I you use this in a tutorial, and I'm gonna use your code, and I'm gonna make references to your code and leave credits to him, and he said, oh, that's cool. So thanks to him, we now have this nice tutorial. So this is how you deploy your first PyScript app. I hope you learned a ton. If you want to see other PyScript demo, I have a few other ideas. I have them on my notebook. I'm probably gonna have time over the weekend to come up with something new. So remember to subscribe, and so you'll be notified of new videos when they come out. And we'll be doing a lot more cool stuff with PyScript, maybe launching a full dashboard. So I'll leave you with that for today. Have a nice day. Goodbye.